Good morning, and welcome to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I'm Tristan Harris, your host, and today we're going to chat with Adnan Masood, AI architect with UST, on closing the gap between tech and talent. Dr. Adnan Masood is chief AI architect and lead AI engineer, directing enterprise-wide strategy for artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, and academic partnerships. A Harvard Business School Advanced Management Program alumnus and former visiting scholar at Stanford AI Lab, Dr. Masood brings more than 2 decades of global leadership in financial technology and large-scale systems engineering. Recognized as a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP for artificial intelligence, he guides C-suite executives at Fortune 500 firms and high-growth startups on responsible AI adoption, while spearheading joint research with MIT CSAIL, Stanford AI Lab, and other leading institutions. An accomplished author and keynote speaker, he leads a multidisciplinary team of data scientists and engineers who convert cutting-edge research into tangible business value. Dr. Masood is a committed STEM mentor and advocate for workplace diversity. So, Adnan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin, for having me. I honestly wanted to have this conversation, and thank you for the kind introduction. Everyone is talking about the AI capability story, and nobody's really talking about the talent equation underneath it. And I think the talent equation is a part which determines where your company actually wins. So, really glad to be here, and would love to have a further deep down into this.
Yeah, and it's a very important discussion because there's, everybody is so focused on the tools, right? And all of the advancements that AI can make, but nobody's talking about the talent that gets it there, right? And that's a lot of what I'm really interested to learn from you. So if you want, we can jump right in. What
Absolutely.
does so let's jump right in, Andon. What does bridging needs and technology implementation really look like when people are at the center of the process?
Right. So first, I think we need to define the gap, like what the gap between tech and talent really means. And these are essentially the three gaps stacked on top of each other. And people tend to conflate them. And there's a fourth one, a related concept. I'll talk about it briefly. But there's a term in the Bay Area we tend to use. It's called capability overhang. And I haven't seen this capability overhang as much as we have had in our lifetime of technology. Maybe earlier was cloud. The models can already do more than almost any organization has figured out how to use them for. That's essentially a simpler definition for what capability overhang means. We have seen that about roughly 42% of the Gen AI initiatives at large enterprises are being abandoned, and it's about 17% up from the year prior. And that is not because the technology is failing ourselves. It's because the organizations are failing to absorb that. And that is a gap. Like the capabilities out there waiting. The talent and the workflows to harness this is that's what's missing. So the overhang sits on top of the three more familiar gaps. The first one is what I like to call the capability gap. And that's a frontier model are getting updated and developed, and you're probably hearing about this every week. It feels almost like every week there is a new model drop or a new capability drop or a new MCP server drop. And if you see, the large model life cycle is about almost 6 weeks. So the frontier of any individual professional knows how to do is moving at a personal learning cadence, which is much slower. Right? It's widening the delta between what tools can do and what most practitioners can drive the tools to do. And that is a capability gap. And I think that's a really an important area we don't really talk as much about. And when it comes to self-learning and the productivity J curve, which the Stanford Digital Economy calls it. And I'll talk more about the J curve aspect of it. And the second gap I'm seeing is the pipeline gap. So how the formal training systems we have, the universities, which were designed for necessarily for a world where the half-life of a technical skill was maybe about 10 years. We have at that point, a 4-year degree definitely made sense. And now the half-life of a technical skill is close to about 18 months. And that's why a degree which was designed like 3 years before you were enrolled, taught by professors who wrote the syllabus a year before that, it becomes a structural mismatch. And
Yeah.
that creates this whole pipeline gap. The third one is the expectation gap. Employers are writing job descriptions that ask for 5 years of experience at technology, which existed for like maybe 12 to 14 months. So we're asking for these unicorns, which don't really exist, because think about it, like MCPs, fine tuning different models, creating agentic AI harnesses. These are such new concepts that they were not necessarily taught in school, and now you have to adopt. So these three problems, the expectation gap, then we have our pipeline gap and the capability gap. All of these gaps are essentially making that gap even larger, right? So asking a recruiter to hire harder is not really going to work, because essentially we are asking for 5 years of experience in technology that have existed for like much lesser. The
So
market isn't broken. Our job descriptions are.
yeah, so that reminds me, there was a thing that blew up on social media maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was this guy had applied for a job, and they were asking, they turned him down because he didn't have 4 years of experience in a certain programming language, and he was the one that wrote the programming language 2 years beforehand. So there's no way to have 4 years experience. There's nobody more experienced in that,
Yeah,
but they just blanket turned him down because they didn't understand, and that's probably a lot of what we're seeing here too. One thing you
absolutely.
said about the pipeline gap too resonated with me. When I went through college, I was in school for marketing, right? I'm a marketer. It's what I'm passionate about. A lot of what we were learning then was outdated methodologies by the time I was in the workforce 2, 3 years later, right? It was marketing from the mid 2000s, and that wasn't exactly pertinent or useful in 2010, right? Because digital marketing advanced so quickly. And, I'd be very surprised if this isn't that on steroids. If the AI, kind of advancement isn't so much faster than what we saw even in the digital marketing industry, where, we prided ourselves on moving quickly and the constant change. So I think that that's very, very poignant. And I think that there's going to be a a moment where, and you would probably know this more than me, but it seems logical that we would need to change how we are teaching that, and instead of teaching to a specific model or discipline or how to, instead
Yeah,
teaching to a skill of how do you keep up, how do you adopt quickly, how do you kind of move along, because that's going to be so much more of an important skill moving forward than simply learning how to, use something like Java or something like that.
that's right. To that's a really great point you bring up about the new definition of what the jobs are and what the skills are required. So the way I see it is that talent shortage we are seeing in the industry right now isn't really a labor problem, it's a vocabulary problem. Because this frontier of these models is jagged, and which means that models can do certain things really well and other things not so well. And nowadays, if you define a junior developer, it's not a 22-year-old writing code, but it's a person who is directing 5 agents and catching them when they are confidently wrong and doing hallucination. So that vocabulary change is what's bringing down a different aspect of, to your point, as what the skills actually matter at this point, and what are the things. And usually I hear a very cop-out answer where it's like, it's a vague version of like soft skills or AI literacy was required, right? And I really want to ground this answer in a real research, because this is where conversation gets become very loosey goosey. The single most important conceptual frame, I think, from a research perspective, since I'm a machine learning PhD and a more research oriented person, I like to see what industry is saying. And there's a very famous paper which came out of navigating the jagged technology frontier. It came actually in 2023, which is light years in today's world. But Karim Lakhani at HBS, my school, he published that, and he's talking about how the competence of a model like GPT-4 completes different type of tasks faster with higher quality. Right, that was the headline. But if you dig down into that research, you'll find out that it's what the skill really is needed is the crafting of that judgment under uncertainty. If you sum it up, it's like, how can you have a model, is it's giving you answer, is it right, is it close to right, is it confidently hallucinating, can you tell the difference? So most failures we see today in production AI systems aren't model failures. These models are fairly good. They are human failures to really catch a bad model output. So what Harvard team was doing is they're naming their different failure modes where you stop checking and then you essentially fall asleep at the wheel. It's a real phenomena where it's not really, there's a skill of not falling asleep is rare and almost untrained. That's something which people think that the first job out of college for most of these folks would be an AI auditor, a person who audits the output coming in from there. There's other skills which are quite important in this area. One of them is eval thinking. So eval is big, right? Evaluation, you must have heard of it like hundreds of times during your interviews. Can you design a test that tells you whether a system is actually working? That's an eval, right? It used to be a very niche QA skill, and eval becomes such a big thing because machine learning and evals, we use write them all the time. But now I think it's a core competency for anyone who is working with AI. So if you cannot define good, if you don't have a ground truth, you can't ship anything which is responsible, right? Otherwise, you're essentially just writing marketing emails or something which has low impact. But eval-driven development is quite important. At UST, you start calling it the eval-driven development, and it's an analogy borrowed from like test-driven development. Same instinct, but it's a harder problem, especially for AI systems. So that I think is a second really important skill to have. The third most important skill would be system decomposition. So system level thinking about how, I mean, it's really, AI is really good at very deep tasks, but if you try to take a fuzzy business problem and try to make it a clean executable pieces and try to make them all work together, that's a system level thinking is a very important key skill for these people to have. And one of the things going around, I think Andrew Karpathy has made it familiar, very popular, is that you can outsource your thinking, but you cannot outsource your understanding. And I think that's really powerful. Right?
Yeah,
And
it is.
yeah, and taste is possibly the only moat left. Right? They're talking about how the moat left in this whole build process is now that. So choosing the right architecture, choosing the right implementation, the exposure, the judgment is now that taste. Having tools fluency, so you are not just chat GPT everything, but actually know where these specific tools, your anti-gravities of the world and the cloud codes of the world and coworks, actual depth in understanding chain agents, knowing the difference between LangGraph and LangChain and LangSmith, and be able to have apply these. There's a very famous paper out called Cyborg Centaurs and Self Automators talks about that. So having that skill set is quite important. And the reason of this whole shift, if I want to leave the audience with, is that when the marginal cost of producing a draft is now dropping to zero, like it's very easy. The whole workflow has shrunk down. So when the marginal cost of this producing a draft and artifacts is dropping to zero, whether it's code, whether it's marketing copy, the bottleneck moves to now choosing, and choosing is taste. So you cannot really prompt engineer your way to taste.
Yeah, and I think there's two things that I'd love to comment on. One, the AI auditor kind of role that you had discussed. I think that to tie that back into kind of a low tech real world example, uh, when there's a train driver, right, an engineer that drives a train, there always has to be a conductor as well. And the reason for that is that it is so boring and routine that it becomes very easy to become complacent and miss certain things. And that's why the job of the conductor is to double check all of that. And it's kind of make sure he's not about to blow through a stop sign or stop signal for a track or something like that, which is in the real world very important. Uh, so the same kind of thing with AI auditing. It's making sure that you're not getting too complacent and being in a position where you're trusting every output, because it does very confidently, hallucinate at times. One example that one of our first guests on the show gave is he was specifically asking for emojis, I think of a starfish or something like that in ChatGPT, knowing the ASCII library that they used, they wouldn't be able to give it. But it kept returning different emojis that were close, but not quite it, and confidently saying, here's your emoji of the starfish. So long story short, it's very common that at times it will hallucinate, and having something that, and that's a very benign example, but if it's in analyzing, a million rows of data for a business decision that's incredibly important, that's, not something you can just trust at face value at times. So I think that
Definitely.
that's a
Yeah.
very, very important thing to call out. And I think that, I think you had said that you imagine that being like one of the entry level roles moving forward. If I understood that correctly. And I think I think it will be. I think that it's such an important thing. So
Right. And I think asking for the right individual talent is quite important. And having that talent also know the broader so for example, the ASCII example you brought up, the edge level cases and figuring out if the edge cases are being addressed. And those are quite important. And knowing how to prompt and how to context engineer properly in our system level, especially now the models are becoming better and better at actually understanding the intent. So I call this like a AI DLC or AI driven SDLC. It's industry term now. And how do you go from intent to deployment or intent to application? That gap is so shrunk. But this is shrunk for the people who are able to actually understand explain your intent to the machine so well that when the machine is going through the chain of thought reasoning, because it's also doing retrospection. You have seen the models do retrospection. They try to understand the code. They try to understand your intent, and they try to map your intent to the code. And at the end of the day, I mean, these are proverbially stochastic parrots who are trying to do next token prediction at a much larger level and trying to do matrix multiplication behind the scenes at a much sophisticated level. Now, in order to do that, they need to have the right nomenclature, the right jargon, the right terminologies to activate those neurons so they can actually work properly. And I think the human in the loop aspect of it, which ensures that these people have production quality experience to be able to give that answers properly is more than like a really important skill. And that otherwise it becomes a failure mode if you don't know how to prompt and get the results properly and also be able to fix it. So for instance, non-functional requirement is one of the things I usually ask for during my interviews and ask individuals about, like, how do you're doing vibe coding great. You created this demoable application in a weekend, which would have taken somebody maybe 3 months to build of 5 individuals. Right? That's a very common phenomenon now. You're really proud of this, and this is great. Like, this is a great skill to have. However, in order to take to the next step to a customer or to actually be able to deploy to production, how about the robustness, security, reliability? How about the error handling modes of the failures? When we deploy it on a hyperscaler, what is the FinOps going to look like? Would it scale? Would it require 100,000 people to start signing up? How would you actually do FinOps on that? These are the things from a system level thinking. I think a engineer needs to, looking for building those skills. I see posting for senior AI engineers requiring 7 years of experience with large language models. It's like, really? Yes. So
yeah,
the talent we are looking for exists, but it's just the vocabulary is different. I think we are screening for the wrong things. The standard technical interview with algorithmic puzzles on whiteboard or a coding test with a candidate can now do reverse a linked list. I think those are valuable if you are doing systems programming or somebody who is writing that code. But majority of the CRUD style development, which we do today for enterprise applications, I think we also undervalue non-traditional candidates. I think this is opening a new door for the people who are non-traditional. There is recently a hackathon happened where a lawyer beat a lot of CS grads because English majors can probably better prompt engineers than other senior developers.
that's
And a
true. Yeah,
market, yeah. And with your eloquence, I'm pretty sure, Tristan, you can probably out prompt me any day.
I don't know if that's true, but thank you. So something, we talked about the pipeline the pipeline of skilled labor coming into this. What I'm seeing now is businesses trying really hard to keep up with everything going out. And it's hard when that pipeline doesn't exist to hire people with experience from those traditional kind of pathways where you talked about kind of non-traditional candidates. needing to be considered. I 100% agree with that. Like, I think right now we should be looking at the people who are making passion projects with AI
Absolutely.
more so than
Absolutely.
somebody that, has a CS degree from 10 years ago. And I'm sorry for anybody with a CS degree from 10 years ago. Uh, but it all raises the question of how can organizations really identify these skill gaps in their workforce before trying to roll out new technologies, new AI tools, right? How do they know that they're not pushing something that their labor force can't support?
Right. So there is, I think this question has two components to it. The first one is more about what kind of education, what kind of credentialing you're looking for, where does it fit in, what kind of skills and what kind of signals essentially you're looking for. Right. So degree is one of the signals, which is a sorting mechanism. It shows us that you can finish a long structured commitment. I'm sorry, that you are exposed to a certain peer group, you are credible, somebody can vouch for you, right? Knowledge is a secondary artifact, but being a stick with a problem for such a long period of time and be able to work with that, especially, I mean, in higher education, that actually shows you that this person has the capability to have the grit and the resilience to do that, right? That's so. This is definitely always going to be, I think, relevant. The discipline, the exposure, the rigor, baseline rigor, that's a signal people are looking for. And to your point, I mean, that's the passion project aspect of it. If you can show those passion projects, you are essentially signaling me the discipline, the passion, and what you can do with minimal knowledge around this, or actually build your knowledge around it. So a portfolio plus conversation model, right? So the portfolio of your skills and the things you have built. And it really is a, like, if you walk me through how you built something, tell me how, what you would do differently, what you have learned, and you're showing me your portfolio. It's a much higher bandwidth signal than 4 years of GPA in irrelevant courses. Like that, and you can do that in 90 minutes. If we have a conversation and you tell me about this skill builder and a skill first application, and talk to me through this, I can really get a good feeling that now my sorting mechanism has changed. Like employers who are noticing this sort of new signals, they're definitely helping us uh, really sort it better to get the right talent because they have learned these things on their own. I'm seeing this constantly, especially with CS graduates. I have to give the credit myself being a CS person and a lot of CS person. So it's relatively easier. It's not that the other people from other background are less likely to do this because just the foundations are there for CS grads. And along with that, I think the second part of your question was around what do people have to show to do to show those signals, right? What does that fluency is going to look like? And I think particularly there are few things which happens when in order to signal this. And there's a really good book by Ethan Mollick called Co-Intelligence. He actually like put in a few rules around this. And one of them is build something real with agents. So not like, just go wipe code something. In that case, or put a workflow at your actual job or something which you have seen, which requires automation end to end with agentic tool. Measure where it works, iterate through that, right? Always invite AI to the table is one of the rules he had built in there in that case. So you definitely need to have something you have built something real with the agent. And that's what I talk to I mentor a lot of fresh grads or the people who are coming out of the college or who are still in the college or going to hit the market is to learn by doing and develop the eval thinking. I think that's one of the main things which I specified earlier. How do you copy, you code, you design, you analyze, how you have the rigorous habit of evaluating the AI output. When does it fail? What are the failure modes? What can you tell from these failure modes? That meta skill, the differentiating skill and be the human in the loop is getting lost. You can nowadays it's happening more and more when you are talking to people, developers especially, and ask them what is this piece of code doing? And they will tell you, they will have blank stare like I have no idea. And that really scares me.
They'll tell you the outcome, but not the actual process of how it's doing it. And yeah, and I think to your
Yeah,
point,
and even in
CS,
abstract, a lot of places it's like, why is this file here and what artifacts are being created? And it's like, majority of that is like, oh, because the prompt generated it. Having that idea of like what the
yeah,
code is doing is quite critical. So these folks need to move the stack up towards more judgment and taste. Right? If your job is to produce thing, AI is definitely coming for your job. But if your job is to decide what should be produced and whether it is good, AI is going to make your job more valuable. So you have to move. You can't wait. You have to do this strategic work and the design work and the architecture work. So the closer you are to the production line, the more exposed you are to that. And the last thing is it's very and not thought about much, but I've encountered that in my team as well as other people, is staying learnable. Like I think this is the single most valuable trait in this era. It's not any specific skills, it's the ability to absorb new tools quickly and drop the sunk cost and update your mental model. I've
Yeah.
seen so many times with the people who are senior developers who have been working for a while, they learn this and they stop after learning afterwards, and that's not gonna work, right? There's a Coleman and the Canaries paper by um, uh, Stanford HAI, and they talk about exactly that. If you don't learn and also not unlearn the old learned behavior, you're in trouble. That needs to be really important that you unlearn and still be learnable because this field is changing really fast.
So, how can companies then approach continuous learning in such a rapidly evolving technological landscape? Is there something you recommend? Is there, a lot of it to me seems like the people that are affected are keeping up with it on their own, right? They're not necessarily, there's no structure to it. They're going out and they're trying to figure out what the new thing is because they're passionate about it. But is there a way for companies to actually approach that continuous learning in a structured way to promote success?
Right. This is a great question, and it comes up very often because people are trying to do continuous learning and they struggle with like those courses which which one to subscribe to, and companies are struggling with how to keep up with this. Are we having challenges with who are we hiring? How do we upskill our workforce? And if we upskill our workforce, what models we should use? Should we use co-work? Should we use GitHub Copilot? Should we use Claude? Like those confusions happen. And I think in that case, you probably want to get somebody who can really look at your business case and your workforce and try to guide you. There are some general principles. So first, for graduates who are coming out or the workforce people, you want to separate the fundamentals from frontier. So the fundamentals are there, the linear algebras of the world, the probability theory, the computation theory, the rigor which is put in. That's important, and that's important for the build part of this. But it doesn't apply for the rest of the population who's probably going to be using AI more often, like marketing people, sales people, HR folks, people from various areas. And those will get, most of them will actually get their toolkit from the software they are already using. So most of these software already are coming up with different toolkits. Right? But what I see is now is the world is changing. People are being exposed to ChatGPT and Claude, and they see the power and democratization of things they can do. An HR exec or a sales or marketing exec can build an application over a weekend, which would have taken like a much longer time for somebody else. And now they're asking like, I can build this. Why is it taking so forever? I can create my report in X amount of hours, which would have taken you write SQL and do all of that.
Mhm.
So that democratization I really like. The problem with that is it creates a shadow AI. So now you have people uploading Excel sheets and other custom data over in Claude and really another place, and that's not right because you can't do that for a lot of various
A lot
reasons.
of compliance and security
Compliance
reasons.
and
Yeah.
governance security, and you can't, like, it might have HIPAA and PCI and PII data. So that's a big concern. So you don't want to do that part. So what do? So you enable your team. You provide them the right tools they need to use. If you start saying no to the tools they are using or they are helpful to them, it's going to be quite problematic. You have to enable the teams and give them the tools they definitely need. But when it comes to upskilling your developers, you look at the marketplace, you look at the tool sets available. Claude Code is one of the most wonderful tools out there. So training and upskilling people on that, or hiring the people who have those portfolios pre-built, right? Portfolio of what you have actually built, portfolio of what you have actually shipped, right? So employers can evaluate. So that if you're hiring the people who have those portfolios or inclination to build those portfolio in some shape or form, which is available, that means they have taken the first step, right step. So even internal teams, the people who have built those portfolios with Claude Code, with Codex, with anti-gravity, and other things, and if they're enabling themselves to do that. And that's quite important for people to self-learn. A lot of people there's a typical sentiment like, company needs to invest in me. Well, you need to invest in yourself first. for a company to, you are one of the most important commodity. Why are you not investing in yourself? Why are you not taking the next leap? Because the market is not going to wait for this for you to get upskilled. Like you have to have that credentialing yourself to be able to do that, right? So to get into the deep end now, and well, this is still optional, and see what cowork can help you, what AI fluency would mean. Build something with agents, develop the eval thinking, move up the stack. Like these are the things, including staying learnable. These are just things that I talked about earlier, are quite important for any of the developers to actually get up to speed.
Yeah, and that's a through line for a lot of the conversations we have is invest in yourself, learn how to do this. And honestly, look, like I have some basic coding experience, marketing, digital marketing tends to be a little adjacent to it, but like I gave up early on because I was like, this is probably best left for the dev team. Um, but AI, it's much easier to get hands on it. And you just need to, especially the tool like Claude. Claude, I use all of the time. And, when I first dipped my toes into it, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Am I going to have to review code from this? Like the most I've ever done is written a web scraper. Like this is not something that's going to, buy for me. And it turned out to be, I was making a mountain out of a molehill, and now it's probably one of the most used portions of my toolkit. Um, Something you had mentioned though about the compliance and security risks, our guests that we talked to last week, their whole, the whole topic was around compliance and security with AI and some of the things. Yeah, like you really don't want your dev team to be, denying or refusing to kind of review tools, because then you get your marketing team going out and being like, well, let's just slap a bunch of customer data into Claude and have it do X, Y, Z. And
Yeah.
it's bad enough if you're not in a field where data security is so important, but if you're
Yeah.
healthcare, finance, anything like that, that is bad. Right, it's
Oh,
bad
yeah,
enough,
really.
but that's real bad.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
so that
unfortunately, compliance and regulation and governance has taken a backseat
it
in
is. Yeah.
now. The EU AI Act is here. So in Europe and other places, we see much more forward-moving momentum in this case. Especially we saw in cloud with GDPR, EU AI Act is here enforced. So companies are looking into it, but it's in US it hasn't been a really huge priority for us. Uh,
No.
but what I'm seeing now is that there would be some ripple effect from other places. My co-author and I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Responsible AI in the Enterprise. It was a bestseller on Amazon in that category for a while. And it's we get a lot of questions and talk about this. We are working on this new book on agentic AI. But to your point, is governance and security, especially around this, is important. And it's not that hard to actually implement that without stopping people from doing what they're doing. If they want to use, Chat GPT, or they want to use other models, there are enterprise grade models available for them to use. Like the Azure has a really good, Microsoft Azure has a really good ecosystem where it's secure, reliable, it's robust, it has all the enterprise grade security. Still, it gives you the same functionality you need. So having that, maybe it's a little expensive as compared to a traditional one, but it's way better than getting into your data leaked in the public.
Yes.
It's and especially from some places not even an option. So it's very important that you enable your team instead of stopping them, so they fall into the shadow AI. And I also want to see about like how the professionals are changing. Like for you as a content marketer, you are seeing that it's no longer about just creating a massive demand for content production. It's actually like what is good. One of the things I see is very much fundamentally has changed is for SEO professionals. The search engine optimization has like this is completely
Yes.
changed. Like imagine the traditional SEO used to be about producing pages, links, giving an algorithm where behavior was stable. You create. Now we have just generative search. So the surface area is very different. Now you have generative AI giving AI overview. Then you have conversational answer engine. Then you have agentic browsing. So uh, they are rewriting the idea like what rank even means anymore. Right? So
So this is my forte, right? This is the
okay.
world I live in. I came up through my career in organic and ranking for number one for some of the most competitive keywords out there, like SEO agency, right? It really has rewritten the game quite a bit. So it's really interesting from a uh, pure landscape kind of view, where we early on got hit by a lot of people generating programmatic pages, so just vomiting out as much content as possible programmatically through AI. And
Yeah.
that worked short term. But then, all the different models started realizing, hey, we're kind of training our AI on content that was generated by our AI, and it's kind of a downward spiral at that point. So I think Google AI overviews and Gemini were the first to really catch on to that and start kind of punishing some of that behavior. But it is really interesting to see how drastically it's changed.
It
I
has,
could,
it has. Yeah.
yeah, I
And
could,
and people have been talking about like how SEO died. It didn't really die. Like it just changed its shape. It
yeah,
morphed into got promoted. So I've seen in the industry the people who have really figured out how to optimize for this new answer engine and not the search engine part of it, but more of answering part of it, are really running the next generation of marketing organization, and might be you, Tristan, who has
I
figured that out how to do
we're
it
tr-
well.
we're trying. I can't say we from our own internal leads and NextNet as a company, for those who are listening and might not know, we own a handful of marketing companies or marketing adjacent businesses, such as Authority Builders,
Hmm.
Baha, LinkBuilder.io, and a few others.
Wow.
And we're seeing such a transformation between how we're generating interest to the company and how we're generating leads and connecting with our customers. One of the biggest things that we've seen is that when we are able to get cited in AI for a term or prompt that has some kind of purchase intent to it, we're seeing those customers that come in as leads convert at almost 9 times the rate as we did through traditional organic, which was already converting at a higher rate than we saw
Right.
through paid advertising. Uh, and a lot of that is because when you have an AI answer, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or Google AI overviews, whatever, evangelizing for your brand, then you're basically being given a vote of confidence by an
Yeah.
external third party, which carries a lot of
Exactly.
weight. So,
Exactly.
uh, and beyond that, we are developing a whole tool to, I can't get super in depth. It is live now. NextNet, if you go to getnextnet.ai to shamelessly plug for all our audience, it's a tool to help brands not only track AI search, but actually peer in it. It helps them figure out what content to create. It helps them kind of figure out all of the different ways that their brand is being mentioned. It includes market insights. It includes all kinds of different things, and it's kind of in an interesting place in the market because so many people are tracking that, but nobody's trying to create a tool to help influence it, and that's a large part of what we're working through and launching. We partnered with NVIDIA to create it. It's
Wow.
it's been it's been pretty awesome, and it's forced us to stay on top of it, which is good. But yeah, I went off on a tangent there. This podcast isn't about me, Adnan. Isn't about
And
us,
I would
but
love to get a guest copy, a special guest copy of that tool and try it
yeah,
out. I mean,
of
that's
course, yeah. And I
definitely.
would love your feedback on it. Absolutely, because we we're always trying to figure out how we can do better, how we can improve further. So, but to get back on topic, now that I've
Mhm.
taken this completely off the rails, to go back to the earlier train analogy, um, what are some ways that organizations can help kind of make learning and development actually move towards a goal instead of just like kind of like we talked about earlier? We talked about how we can make kind of structured learning environment, but how can, if that's not something that can necessarily be effective because people need to be able to dig in and do it themselves and really get that confidence level, how can companies support that?
That that actually I think requires a whole podcast of its own, just because it's such an in-depth discussion, and there's so many different branches to it. So I can speak about how to upskill for developers or software engineers, for AI engineers, for ML ops engineer, LLM ops engineer, even within the AI area. for developing but I think from a company-wide perspective, people need to think in AI fluency term seriously and specifically. It's can't be done with a 1 hour lunch and learn. That's not gonna really cut it. So one of the key things is to give access to these tools, control access with governance to these tools, and let people figure it out. You'll be really surprised in the ingenuity people come up with, whether it's prompt, whether it's creating POCs and applications. Now you can build and publish things very quickly. Give them that freedom and democratization and enable them, and you'll be pleasantly surprised on what things people can do with these tools. Like that's an important area. And I know that's an investment, but that's an investment in your people. People need to see that value, and that's how they will learn. There's a lot of work which is being done because of the pace of these things, the courses can't really keep up, or you will get substandard quality of things which are not really great. One of the best approaches is having real time, real budget, real outcomes. So let's pick few workflows uh, within your company and have your team rebuild those workflows with AI in the loop. I've seen this kind of work actually pay more dividend than any long classes, because these 1 day, 5 day workshops where people are just sitting there uh, scrolling through reels, it's much better if people are actually going to go through and rebuild this. And you measure that lift, like what's happening. Pay people who get good at this more publicly and visibly, like whether it's payment in rewards or whether it's payment in praise, or whatever the measuring criteria you have, signal what you value. So that capability overhang you already have in your organization is the real money in the table. So you need to just go and pick it up. And there are one of the courses which I really like, one of the classes is Deep Learning AI, is by Andrew Ng. You probably know him, and it's one of the best sources for learning, even smaller things. They are very short courses, they're for an hour, 2 hour long. And I think our attention spans probably can last that long, I would imagine. So go and if you pick up one of the course about prompt engineering or context engineering or how to build an AI agent, you will not become a master of doing that in an hour, but you will understand the vocabulary and the jargon and the surrounding area around this. And that I think is quite important
Mhm.
to for learning purposes. So I believe very much into learning by doing. People who actually act upon it and apply these technologies, they learn much faster and better, and the recall is much longer. And that's what I recommend internally and do internally, and we do externally as well. USC has trained over 25,000 employees internally, upskill them on AI using these kind of programs where we do hands-on hackathons, we do hands-on coding projects and let people work on this.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Getting hands on, and from a my wife who was a teacher for a while can probably speak on this much more eloquently. But there are different ways that people learn, and a large amount of people cannot learn well simply by being lectured to or taught to, or reading a kind of exposition on how to use AI to help in whatever industry. Most
Yeah.
people have to get hands on, and that's
Yeah.
a big part of uh, educational theory now, and
Yeah.
how teachers actually implement it in their classroom. So I'm sure you could also speak a lot more to that than I can,
Yeah,
right?
this is a great topic. The pedagogy of this has changed, right? We always have been gone into this whole sage on the stage idea. Like sage is on the stage, is gonna do this talk to us, talk on us. But now it's like more of a mentor by my side, who is walking me through. And AI can be a really great mentor in this area.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to you for another 2 hours. I think that this conversation has been really, really interesting. We've drilled down in areas that I think are incredibly important for most of our audience listening. Um, but last question, looking ahead, what do you think the workforce of the future will need most? Technical skills, adaptability, or just something else entirely?
So just so I understand your question correctly, you are asking about looking ahead, what
Yeah.
like 5 years out, what the talent landscape would look like in like
Yeah,
2031.
mostly
I don't
what's most important for people today. So people in the workforce today, what's going to be the most important? Is it technical skills that they develop? Is it adaptability, or is it something completely different that we're not considering?
So what I see is both from a hiring or hiring manager's perspective and also from people who are applying, we need to do a few things. Number one, let's start from where the hiring actually happens or the organization wise. Uh, we need to audit our job description. So we take out these unicorn requirements and what that role actually needs. And what the reason I'm doing it from the top down is to make the things more easier for the people downstream to go and apply. I said, we have to audit our job descriptions. We have to take out this whole, what is the minimum skill set required to do this in the first 90 days, right? And there's you're probably seeing the resumes with a lot of hallucinated experience requirements that pile up. Same in job description. So that's the first thing that needs to go. Redesigning the interview process, having applied work sessions on that. It will require a little more investment or time, but understanding how they can eval, how they can do clean handoffs, how they can write structured prompts, those things. So that's the second thing I think we need to do as an organization, as an industry, to redesign our interview process and invest in our teams for AI fluency internally. Right? That's something which we'll see. Now, for the junior pipeline, it's not really necessarily disappearing, but I think the people who are coming up need to do the emerging work. They need to prepare themselves for doing the emerging work. What I mean by that, they need to know evals. They need to understand how to evaluate these models. They need to be able to orchestrate these agents and work with these agents and orchestrate the design of this. They should be able to do good context engineering and prompt design. They need to understand human in the loop oversight. And also there is a preceptorship model by Microsoft's Mark Rosanovich, he probably is the CTO of Azure. He talked about this preceptorship model, really good paper by SCM published. It's like how you pair them with senior engineers from day one. How do you work with senior engineers to understand the traditional SDLC process, and how do you apply an AI DLC process? So you're essentially, what you're doing is compressing the apprenticeship process. So the new people who are coming up in the pipeline understand the value of the apprenticeship and preceptorship model, because we have to train people deliberately now. The natural apprenticeship has produced senior engineers for past 15 years. That process is now broken. Now we need to have that AI DLC hat on and then see how AI literacy is now a baseline skill.
Yeah,
Recently, I was
absolutely.
talking to a COO, and we were talking about he was saying which part of my company should get AI tools, that like HR or sales or finance or software development, like which should be good, and I like which part of your company should get internet. And
Yeah,
he thought I was joking, and I'm like, no, this is how it is going to be. So it's a survival instinct now. It's required as part of the implementation. Yeah.
absolutely. That's a very valid point. I think that's a very good way to kind of put a pin on it, is which part of your company needs internet, right? Like, I think everybody needs to be aware of this and try to really upskill towards it. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Masood. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. Before we close out, we like to give our guests an opportunity to kind of talk about where people can find them, anything that's valuable or important to them. So feel free if you want to plug anything. Now's your time.
So I'm easily Googleable. So you can find my writing. I do a Medium blog post. So I post pretty much every other day. So you'll be able to find my posts over there. I also tweet, uh, and I'll be on this podcast, so you can see this. Also, a shout out to my upcoming book on agentic AI, and hopefully it will be available in summer. It's right now going through technical review. So please check it out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. For our audience, if you liked this episode, please make sure to follow us on the streaming platform you're listening on. Leave a review. And as always, please comment on topics you would like for us to cover. It is a huge help in helping us figure out which guests to bring on and what will resonate best and what will interest you guys the most. So thank you very much, everybody that's listening. Thank you again, Dr. Masood. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I will see you all next time.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.